Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we try to take all the chaotic noise of the information world and, well, filter it down into something you can actually use.
Some pure, actionable insight.
Exactly. And our mission today is a big one. We're tackling what is, I think, maybe the defining struggle of the 2020s.
Oh, for sure. The mental health exigency.
Yeah, I mean, why is it that in an age with more connection than ever, more access to knowledge, we feel more confused, more isolated, and just mentally frayed than ever before?
It's such a profound question, and it really signals a massive shift in our focus as a culture. I mean, if you look back at, say, the 1960s and 70s, the big cultural battles were often crises of the body.
Right, fights against physical tyrannies. You're talking civil rights, equal access, stuff focused on the external world.
Exactly, the structure of society. But now, the battleground has moved inward. We are, I think, truly in a crisis of the mind.
And the data on this, it's not just a feeling people have, it's an alarm bell, and it's ringing at full volume.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, Scientific American was tracking this decline a long time ago. They noted mental health had been deteriorating pretty steadily since the 1990s.
And that culminated in suicide rates hitting a 30-year high back in 2017. That was even before the major stresses of this decade really hit.
Well, that's the thing. Once we hit the early 2020s, the numbers they exploded. If you look at young people, a 2021 CDC survey found that a staggering 42% of them.
It's 42%.
42%. They reported feeling so sad or hopeless over just a 2-week period that they couldn't do their normal daily activities.
Wow. And if you look at the emergency response side of things?
It's just as stark. The National Alliance on Mental Illness reported that their crisis calls jumped by 251% between 2020 and 2021.
251%. I mean, that's just an unsustainable burden for society, for individuals, for everyone.
Completely unsustainable.
The sources we're looking at today, they refer to this specific time as the era of magical overthinking.
I love that phrase.
Me too, because it perfectly captures this central conflict, right? We have this innate, almost ancient human need for events to feel meaningful.
A craving for there to be a reason behind everything.
Yeah.
For order.
Yes, a distinct craving for intentionality, and that is colliding, just head on, with this overwhelming, chaotic flood of digital information and what feels like the ultimate paradox, mass loneliness.
So we're isolated, we're burnt out, and we're just desperately trying to slap a narrative onto things that, maybe don't have one.
And the mechanism driving all this modern irrationality is, well, it's deceptively simple, and it's entirely biological. We're talking about cognitive biases.
Right. These are basically the self-deceptive thought patterns our brains developed because, let's face it, our brains are imperfect processors. They're mental shortcuts.
I think it helps to think about our ancestors, trying to survive out in the wild. Their brains, which are running on the same fundamental hardware as ours.
Right, exact same hardware.
But they couldn't afford to spend 3 hours cataloging the exact color of every bug that flew by.
No, you'd get eaten by a tiger while you were doing it.
Exactly. So the mind developed these really ingenious shortcuts. The goal wasn't to achieve perfect rationality.
No, it was about perfect resource rationality. It was all about prioritizing speed and survival. It had to reconcile our limited memory and our finite time with the need for quick, decisive action.
But the clash today is that our modern environment isn't resource scarce at all. It's resource explosive.
Oh, yeah. We face the data points of 1,000 lifetimes every single day. We just cannot sit and mull over every single piece of information.
So we fall back on those same clever cheats our ancestors used. But now, in this age of constant connection, these same biases are causing the modern mind to, overthink and underthink all the wrong things.
Totally. We get obsessed with these unproductive paranoias. Was my ex's face popping up in my suggested contacts a sign from the universe?
Right. But then we completely bypass the complex, difficult deliberations that actually require real, sustained effort. So our mission in this deep dive is to expose 7 of these fundamental distortions so you can start to recognize the outdated code that might be running your own operating system. Okay, so let's start with a bias that I think shapes our culture in a really profound way, and it really influences who we decide to trust. It's called the halo effect.
The halo effect. This is the one where we basically morally lionize a person because of one single, really compelling positive trait.
Like they're incredibly attractive or wildly successful or just exceptionally talented at something.
Exactly. And because of one thing, we instantly assume they must also be deeply self-aware and worldly and socially competent and just, morally impeccable.
It's a huge leap.
It is. And the original source for this bias was, naturally, our parents, parental figures.
That makes sense.
Yeah, when we're young, we assume the elders who care for us, who give us food and shelter, who know all this stuff we don't, they must therefore know everything.
They have this halo of competence.
Totally. The source material shared a really personal example of this, where the author talks about her mother, who is this highly accomplished cancer cell biologist who actually cured her own cancer.
Wow. I mean, that accomplishment alone casts her in an almost mythical light, right? It leaves very little room for human error.
Almost none. And the emotional stakes of that primary relationship, that parent-child attachment, are now just projected wholesale onto public figures.
People we know absolutely nothing about in reality.
Nothing. And this is how we get the rise of the stans. It's a term we use really lightly now, but it's actually quite dark in its origins.
It comes from that Eminem song, right? Stan.
It does, from 2000. It's a mashup of stalker and fan.
And you see these fan groups, the Swifties, the Barbs, the Little Monsters, they adopt these almost monastic, cult-like names, and they show a ferocity that is, genuinely frightening sometimes.
Oh, it's terrifying. We see critics who are actively self-censoring. They're afraid to publish a negative review because they know they risk being canceled or doxxed or just flooded with threats by these intensely committed digital armies.
And the dynamic that plays out is this constant, exhausting cycle. It starts with deification, and then it's followed inevitably by betrayal.
And I think the case study of Taylor Swift and her fan base is probably the most potent example of this right now.
For sure. They've been through these huge scandals, Ticketgate, Lavendergate, Jetgate. They're all named like political crises.
They are. And what's happening is that the fans immerse themselves so deeply in her work that they create this rich, elaborate cinematic universe around her. They have rituals, expectations. She's their mother.
But that's where the cognitive distortion really kicks in, right? The fans are creating a set of expectations that the star, who is, at the end of the day, a massive capitalist enterprise,
never actually committed to. Exactly. When Swift posted some specific tweets condemning Trump and police brutality, a lot of her stans immediately just assumed this was a signal of a new, comprehensive activist era for her.
And when she didn't escalate that, or when it came out that key members of her security detail were former special forces and ex-FBI, law enforcement figures, the sense of betrayal was just profound.
It's the ultimate failure of the halo effect in action.
Yeah.
They morally lionized her based on conclusions with barely any evidence, just their own projections.
And then they tried to knock her off that same pedestal with equal commensurate zeal when those projections proved false. They were following a fictional character they designed themselves, not the actual person.
And if you look at this culturally, this whole shift of celebrities becoming these quasi-gods, it really took off in the 1960s and 70s.
And that timing isn't a coincidence, is it?
Not at all. It coincides directly with this massive loss of trust Americans had in traditional authority figures, politicians, clergy, even doctors, after huge events like the Vietnam War and Watergate.
Widespread institutional failure. The public needed a new paragon, a new figure to believe in.
And they found it in activist entertainers.
Yeah.
And today, that parasocial gap has shrunk to almost nothing. A simple, quickly typed Instagram caption can feel like a deeply personal letter from someone you love.
It feels so intimate. The source material references a 2005 study on the celebrity worship continuum, which I found fascinating. It goes way past just casual enjoyment.
It does. It moves from that initial entertainment social phase into the intense personal stage. That's where you start having frequent, sometimes unwanted thoughts about the person.
And then it escalates from there.
It can, into what's called borderline pathological. And that's characterized by delusional thoughts, like believing you share a secret code with your favorite celebrity, or even engaging in acts of self-sacrifice for them.
And this intense, almost pathological worship, it's often rooted in some pretty profound psychological deficits, isn't it?
It is. Studies repeatedly connect this kind of behavior to early life emotional deficits, to isolation, to insecure parent-child attachment. Often it stems from parental absence.
So young people who are lacking positive real-life role models or stressors, they just focus on these media surrogates instead.
Right. And sometimes they engage in a behavior that psychologists call splitting, where they divide these public figures into two extreme categories. They're either immaculate saints or they're disgraced demons. There is absolutely no middle ground.
And what's so tragic about all this is that this kind of worship is, at its core, dehumanizing. It just annihilates person's room for complexity, for blunders, for just having a bad day.
And crucially, this suffering is applied disproportionately. The source material really highlights that female idols, who are often cast in this mother role, they suffer the harshest penance for the mildest perceived crimes.
The Beyonce example is just, it's harrowing.
It's a perfect example. She maintains this strict privacy, but when she was scheduled to appear on Good Morning America in 2015, the Stans had already decided what they wanted.
They projected their expectation onto her. They wanted pregnancy news or a new tour.
Exactly. But when she announced instead that she'd gone vegan, the reaction was just vitriolic.
They unleashed this torrent of mockery, spamming her social media with thousands and thousands of hamburger emojis.
I mean, think about that. She was mocked viciously for failing to meet expectations she never, ever set. The Stans demanded a new sibling, a new pregnancy to feed their parasocial attachment, and instead, they got a dietary choice.
The consequence of deification is always retribution. The person on the pedestal is not allowed to just be a person.
So what's the antidote here? Well, the research suggests it lies in connection and empathy, specifically by illuminating the context around the person on the pedestal.
The authors shared how their own relationship with their highly accomplished mother improved dramatically only after the mother shared these confessional memoirs about her life before the author was even born.
Those stories were fundamentally humanizing. They didn't extinguish the halo completely, but they lit up the context around her mother's decisions, and they allowed for what the author calls the garnish of imperfection.
I love that. The garnish of imperfection. We need to accept that our artistic icons, our cultural heroes, they only need to be good enough.
And when we allow for their flaws, we grant them, and really ourselves, the humanity and complexity that's required for any kind of sustained, healthy relationship, even a parasocial one. So, if the halo effect is about how we project meaning onto people, our next bias, the proportionality bias, or PB, is all about how we assign meaning to major events.
Especially events that involve like immense tragedy or immense success.
Exactly. Fundamentally, PB is this deep psychological need for the effect and the cause to be equally weighted. So the greater the effect, the greater we desire the cause to be.
This sounds simple, but you can see how it would be a powerful driver of irrationality.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are wired for paranoia. Natural selection favored the paranoid mindset.
Right. The ancestor who heard a rustle in the bushes and immediately assumed it was a tiger was the one who survived, even if it was just the wind 9 times out of 10.
Precisely. We just cannot rest until we find some intentional force to either fault for our misery or to credit for our success. And in the complexity of the modern world, this often leads to these wildly oversimplified but very powerful explanations.
You see this play out in high-profile criminal cases.
All the time. The sources point to the Amanda Knox case as a perfect example of this. Despite the evidence being highly circumstantial, often pretty deficient, a huge segment of the public remained convinced of her guilt.
They needed a singular supervillain.
They needed the satanic, sex-crazed killer narrative to make the huge amount of sadness and public attention feel proportional to the punishment. A massive, complex tragedy demanded a massive, simple evil to blame.
And this same demand for powerful causes, it drives everything from these huge macro conspiracies like QAnon, which blames all of society's ills on some external elite,
right down to this surprisingly pervasive and frankly insidious movement called conspiracy therapy.
Okay, conspiracy therapy. This is where you see mental health influencers capitalizing on proportionality bias, especially during times of collective crisis.
Yes. And the core thesis is incredibly attractive, especially to people who feel like they've been failed by traditional systems.
So what's the pitch?
The pitch is that licensed traditional therapy and medication are actually keeping you unwell. That true health and success come from self-healing, from making the universe bend in your favor, usually through manifestation. It promises total control.
And there's a subtle but really fascinating psychological flip here.
There is. Classic conspiracy theories, the kind that often target men, they blame an external evil force, a shadowy government, the deep state, you know, the drill.
Right.
But conspiracy therapy often targets women, and it argues that the evil force isn't external. It's your own mind.
It's unresolved childhood trauma that you have to perpetually unblock.
Yes. You are poor, or you are sick, or you are failing because you haven't identified and purged your subconscious self-sabotage. Often, of course, for a recurring monthly fee.
And this creates a really profound danger, which the sources call spiritual bypassing.
This outlook places an obsessive and frankly an impossible focus on personal responsibility. It completely discounts complex systemic factors like medical racism, generational poverty, or just the fact that sometimes bad things happen randomly.
And it actively discourages people from seeking licensed external care like medication or established support group.
The message is, your misery is yours alone to have attracted or to repel.
But the truly terrifying part of this is the documented pathway from what seems like benign self-help to, well, violent extremist conspiracy.
Yeah, the sources really dig into the case of a figure called the manifestation doctor. She was a formerly licensed psychologist who became this holistic health guru. Her posts on the surface were all about empowerment and trauma recovery.
But when you start to follow the thread,
You discover these direct, really disquieting connections. She openly promoted the work of Kelly Brogan, who is identified as one of the disinformation dozen.
that's the group responsible for spreading the vast majority of vaccine and health misinformation online.
Yes, Brogan pushes this incredibly dangerous pseudoscience, falsely claiming that, like, coffee enemas can treat depression and that infectious disease is caused by mental illness, not by pathogens.
And the manifestation doctor herself was found to openly support alt-right extremist figures.
Including a men's rights influencer who's known for promoting anti-mask and anti-vaccine views and sharing just violent misogynistic messaging. The gateway is incremental, and that's what makes this proportionality bias so dangerous.
There's a story in the source material about a woman named Heather that really illustrates this.
Yes, Heather was a new mother. She was struggling with postpartum depression, and she found a lot of solace in the manifestation doctor content about codependency. It felt helpful. So she recommended the account to her father.
And her father was newly sober. He just started therapy and antidepressants.
Right. And within 6 months of joining this online self-empowerment circle, Heather's father stopped taking his antidepressants completely.
Because he was driven by this worldview that medication dulls your intuition, it dulls your senses.
He renounced his licensed therapy in favor of this ambiguous healing, and soon after that, he spiraled directly into QAnon narratives.
That shows the mechanism in action, doesn't it? When an influential figure successfully cracks your faith in one foundational idea like the media or licensed psychiatrists,
The suspicion just seeps in like root rot. The self-healing path, which is driven by this need for a proportional cause, can be a direct gateway to extremism. He worked his way toward believing things he never would have entertained if they were just proposed to him outright.
because the easiest lies to believe are the ones that are closest to the truths you already suspect.
Exactly. And it also highlights this fascinating cultural split. While men's conspiracy theories often point outward to external enemies, UFOs, global cabals, the educated, often financially stable women who embrace these New Age concepts are more likely to internalize the blame.
They mix mysticism with these very technical DSM buzzwords like dysregulated and neural pathways.
It feels like a diagnosis crossed with a personalized tarot reading.
Ultimately, though, the mindset that the universe has your back is still a form of conspiracy theory.
It is, because it implies the universe cares about your individual fate. And, well, nature is often gorgeous in its brutality. The northern lights are beautiful, but they're the product of atmospheric violence, not a light show put on for human theater.
So meaning isn't something the universe just gives us.
No, meaning we learn is our job to create.
Okay, so the moment we start talking about how these narratives spread, whether it's about celebrity betrayal or self-healing conspiracies, we have to talk about the illusory truth effect, ITE.
This is a remarkably frustrating cognitive bias.
It really is. It's our tendency to trust a statement as being factual simply because we've heard it multiple times. Repetition over time literally makes something false sound true.
And this doesn't just operate on big political things. It works on the most whimsical, everyday falsehoods that we all repeat without thinking.
The source material had a wonderful example of this about the author researching wedding traditions. She kept running into this really juicy story.
Oh, I think I know this one. About medieval brides.
Yes. The story that medieval brides carried fragrant herbs and flowers to mask their body odor because they supposedly only bathed once a year.
And that's why June was the most popular wedding month, because it was right after their annual wash.
I have to admit, I've heard that one, and I've probably repeated it. It's great dinner table fodder, right? It's a little gross, a little romantic, and it confirms our modern sense of superiority.
Of course. The author, having heard it so often, even repeated it on her own platform, and the lie just instantly spread even further.
But then a medieval historian, Dr. Eleanor Janega, she chimed in with a much-needed correction.
And what was the reality?
Medieval people, she pointed out, groomed often. They frequently used communal bathhouses. Charlemagne was apparently known to invite groups of nobles to join him for a communal rinse.
So the bouquet had nothing to do with stench.
Nothing. It was carried for the color symbolism of the flowers, and the historian found the real story, the real history, 100 times more amusing and interesting. Yet the myth persists. Why? Because the author had simply encountered it so many times. The ITE in action. We believe what's familiar.
So why do these legends survive? Folklorists suggest a few reasons. One is that they're extremely difficult or impossible to confirm.
Like the myth that if you swallow chewing gum, it takes 7 years to digest.
Exactly. Who's going to check? And they also survive when they capture some kind of culture-wide fear while still being inherently entertaining. The drama of the myth often outweighs the dry satisfaction of a verified fact.
And this is where the persuasive power of language itself really comes into play. Our brains demonstrate what's called rhyme as reason.
Sometimes known as the Keats heuristic, right?
Yeah.
From the poet's declaration, beauty is truth. Truth, beauty.
Yes. And the mechanism behind this is rooted in pleasure. Our brains find rhyme inherently pleasurable because it makes language more predictable, more organized, and therefore easier for us to process.
So when an utterance is attractively structured, when it has that poetic rhythm, we instantly assign it greater trustworthiness, regardless of its actual content.
Whether it's leaves of 3, let it be, or some snappy, rhythmic political slogan. The structural appeal turns these heavy philosophies into adorable, transportable taglines.
And that is precisely why this recipe is so easily weaponized in the socio-political sphere. Historically, proverbs offered these snappy, common-sense answers, but they often came with a corollary, a counter-perspective.
Like the early bird gets the worm.
It's tempered by, good things come to those who wait. It created a sense of balance.
But public figures today, they use that proverb recipe, snappy, rhythmic, easily repeatable, to market these one-sided ideologies that have no room for antidotes.
The persistent welfare queen trope is a perfect example of this. It's a simple, emotionally charged narrative that's designed to stick and be repeated.
The sources mentioned a survey that looked at social media lore and how people tried to subvert this trope.
What did they find?
They found that while many left-leaning participants tried to flip the stereotype, applying the label to corporate welfare recipients or welfare bros, they weren't actually creating sympathetic images of the people who genuinely need government assistance.
So they were just adding new, politically palatable people to the definition of the trope.
Without dismantling the underlying ill-intentioned lie about laziness or failure, the core narrative survived the attempt at subversion.
This all circles back to the inherent limitations of hard data versus the power of a good story.
Yes, the astrophysicist and mythologist Moya McTeer points out that there are different foundations of truth. And sometimes, hard data statistics, graphs, charts, it's just not the most effective way to communicate complex ideas.
People need something more empathetic, more abstract, more narrative-driven to really process them.
Stories are inherently transportable in a way that dry data just is not. Carl Sagan was an absolute master of this. He chiseled these vivid, memorable allegories out of scientific theories.
Like his famous line, "We're made of star stuff."
Exactly. You can rip that story out of its context and retell it anywhere. And that is both the magic and the danger of the illusory truth effect. The best stories, whether they're true or false, are the ones that travel the farthest.
So as we shift from how we process all this external information to how we trap ourselves in bad decisions, we run into two of the most damaging internal forces: the sunk cost fallacy and confirmation bias.
Let's start with the sunk cost fallacy, SEF. This is that really deeply ingrained conviction that any resources you've already committed that you can't get back, money, time, hope, emotional energy,
That they justify spending even more. It's tied so deeply to loss aversion, this almost physiological allergy we have to facing defeat.
you see it everywhere. Forcing yourself to finish a terrible meal because you paid for it.
Or driving for 2 hours in the wrong direction because turning around would mean the last 2 hours were wasted.
The source material shared a case study here that I think will be incredibly resonant for a lot of people. It's about the author's long-term relationship with an ex she calls Mr. Backpack.
This was a 7-year relationship that caused immense emotional suffering. It started when she was 18, and her partner was significantly older.
And she felt compelled to move across the country after college to accommodate him, abandoning her own dream of being a writer in New York City.
The compulsion was absolute. She convinced herself we couldn't break up now, there was so much left to do.
That's the sunk cost talking right there.
It is, she thought, We haven't gone to that concert. We haven't bought our first couch together. I haven't had a satisfying sexual relationship with him yet. She just refused to accept that things would never get back to the bliss of the beginning, because that would mean the previous 7 years were a net loss.
And what's so fascinating is a philosophical reframing of SCF that's proposed by a Professor Ryan Duty. He argued that SCF isn't always irrational, at least not in a purely human context.
Right. He says continuing a losing project actually helps you, subconsciously, create a more positive impression of your own decision-making track record.
Right.
Why? Because admitting what he calls diachronic misfortune is incredibly humiliating.
Okay, let's unpack that jargon a bit. Diachronic misfortune.
It's a very academic way of saying that the sheer social and personal humiliation of admitting you wasted years of your life, or a ton of money, on a bad choice can be more painful than just continuing to suffer under that bad choice.
And this is amplified by our current cultural moment. We live in arguably the judgiest era of all time, with social media's constant scrutiny.
To fess up to a miscalculation, a bad investment, a bad career turn, a toxic relationship, it suggests you're either a loose cannon or an incompetent hack who can't predict your own happiness.
So sticking by your sunk costs helps you weave this cohesive, flattering narrative about yourself. You're the hero of an extraordinary love story.
Not the person who made a series of poor choices.
And that deep, almost primal desire for a cohesive, flattering narrative leads us straight into confirmation bias, CB.
This one is huge. It's our tendency to favor information that validates our existing views and to actively discard, ignore, or reinterpret anything that refutes them.
It's like being a detective who decides who the criminal is on Monday and then just spends the rest of the week finding clues to support that conclusion.
The power of CB is genuinely shocking, especially when it comes to our deeply held identity beliefs. There were studies using MRI scans on participants who were presented with political beliefs they disliked.
And what happened in their brains?
The reasoning areas of their brains, the cool, rational processors, literally went dark. They physically tuned out the facts.
Wow.
But when they were shown information that corroborated their views, the emotional provinces of their minds lit up like a Christmas tree.
And this demonstrates the backfire effect, right? When
Yeah.
you're faced with facts that challenge your core identity, you don't just concede the point.
No, you dig in harder. You often strengthen your original belief. It shows that we prioritize tribal belonging and cognitive certainty over objective truth. Even really smart people do this.
The author's Magic 8-Ball strategy is a perfect, almost funny illustration of this search for certainty, not truth.
Yeah, during a really bad period in her troubled relationship, she admitted to compulsively taking dozens of those internet quizzes designed to tell you if you should break up.
But she only paused and accepted the single result that told her no.
She wasn't seeking accurate insight, she was seeking reinforcement. She was seeking permission to avoid the painful truth.
And in modern life, confirmation bias is kind of essential for managing the sheer anxiety of uncertainty. It helps us bring social reality into alignment with our belief.
It really does. This is why things like astrology, even when people approach it ironically, persist. Calling on the Saturn return to excuse major life changes around age 29 becomes this useful shared lens.
It lets people bond over shared patterns while consciously ignoring all the differences.
Confirmation bias helps us get rid of the anxiety that might otherwise paralyze us from making any timely decision at all.
Okay, so when that deep-seated desire for self-justification from confirmation bias meets the hypervisibility and curated perfection of social media, it just fuels this intense anxiety.
And that anxiety often manifests through the zero-sum bias, ZSB, which we can also call win-win denial.
So ZSB is this false intuition that resources are fundamentally finite, and therefore another person's gain must mean your direct personal loss.
And this intuition is rooted in millennia of living in these small, cloistered communities where survival resources like mates or food or status, they were truly finite.
If we had one apple and you took a bite, I literally received less apple.
Exactly. The problem is that this primitive intuition just fails miserably in the complexity of modern transactions that involve abstract concepts like money or clout or attention or creative output, which are theoretically infinite or at least expandable.
The source material shares a really acute experience of this from inside the competitive world of publishing and media.
Yeah, the author, when she was working as a beauty editor in Los Angeles, writes about feeling in her bones that another beauty editor's blonde hair only made me more brunette. that each influencer's follower count personally rendered me irrelevant.
She was convinced deep down that there was a limited quantity of light in the universe and that everyone else was hoarding it.
And that scarcity mindset is felt really acutely in individualist societies like the US, which stress these constant win-lose binaries.
And you can contrast this with more collectivist attitudes.
You can. A University of Michigan study found that students in East Asian countries were significantly more likely to value being a small sunfish in a large pond.
Meaning they'd rather take a lower-ranking job at a more prestigious company rather than striving for an enviable title at all costs.
They valued the collective status of the institution over their individual ego.
So what's the consequence of this zero-sum bias? It's this toxic spiral of constant comparison and often a lot of internalized aggression.
The author describes masochistically hunting for more people to compete with and then engaging in what she calls shit-talking, both silently in your head and out loud, just to scoop up more candy from the ghost piñata of your own invention.
That's a great line. It's an exhausting, completely self-defeating process.
And what's so critical to understand is that this anxiety is completely divorced from reality and status. We learn that even A-list celebrities suffer intensely from ZSB.
Like Prince being jealous of Michael Jackson.
Exactly. Prince seethed with jealousy over Michael Jackson's commercial success. And Tom Hanks admitted to feeling deep insecurity about Steven Spielberg's prestige, even though Spielberg's not an actor. No one, regardless of their objective success, perceives their own attractiveness or success accurately under this bias.
And this cycle is particularly toxic for women. Research shows they're prone to making more upward social comparisons, focusing exclusively on the peers they perceive as being superior.
And social media just accelerates this. Its core features, the addictive nature, the perfectionistic filters, the curated highlights, they set up young women, in particular, for this vicious feedback loop that leads to depression and low self-esteem.
ZSB also fuels infighting among marginalized groups because of tokenism.
Right, the institutional belief that there's only one spot at the top, that only one or two female or minority players can ever win and hold a top position.
And that manufactured scarcity causes collaborators to sell out their own community, wasting energy blaming each other instead of challenging the institutional structures that are responsible for the scarcity in the first place.
So, if the problem is this constant competition, death helix, what's the way out?
The antidote suggested is shine theory, which was coined by the journalists Anne Friedman and Aminatou Sow. The idea is simple. Befriend her, referring to that intimidatingly witty, stylish, and successful woman.
The premise is simple, but it's psychologically profound. Building genuine self-esteem minimizes the false perception of threat. If you're secure, another person's success doesn't threaten your light, it illuminates a potential path forward.
So connection, not competition, becomes the ultimate catharsis. The author experimented with this herself, following accounts that initially intimidated her, and then direct messaging them with sincere, unvarnished admiration.
And this radical act of connection, which seems so counterintuitive to the zero-sum mind, it led to real-life friendships and professional collaborations.
It forces a realization. Their light doesn't dim yours. Combined, you create something exponentially brighter.
And this requires a major upgrade in our theory of mind, the recognition that other people are driven by complex internal values and reasons for their decisions that we could never predict. We have to remind ourselves that buyers and sellers, writers and artists, they all have motivations that create room for non-zero-sum win-win scenarios in the real world.
Speaking of success and failure, let's move to a cognitive distortion that fundamentally warps our perception of both. Survivorship bias, SB.
This is the simple propensity to focus exclusively on positive outcomes, the things that survive, while totally ignoring any accompanying misfortunes or failures.
Which leads us to completely incorrect conclusions about why something succeeded in the first place.
The canonical example here is just essential. It comes from World War II, when military analysts were trying to figure out how to better armor Allied aircraft.
Right, so they studied the planes that returned from combat, and they noted where the bullet holes were concentrated on the wings, the tail, the areas that looked the most heavily damaged.
And their plan, logically, was to add more armor to those heavily damaged spots. But one mathematician, Abraham Wald, he realized the fundamental flaw in their methodology.
They were only studying the planes that survived the attack.
Exactly. They were looking at the bullet holes that were not fatal. The most vulnerable spots, the cockpit, the engines, were precisely the areas that, if they were hit, ensure the plane never came back.
They were failing entirely to look at the missing data. The holes they could see were irrelevant. The holes they couldn't see were everything.
And today, survivorship bias inflates this pervasive belief that success is available to anyone with adequate skill and effort. It makes us ignore the catastrophic failures that happen to equally skilled and determined people.
We glorify the myth of the college dropout billionaire, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gateses, while ignoring the actual data.
Which is that 84% of America's top billionaires graduated from college, often from Ivy League schools, and are statistically more likely to have a master's or a PhD than no degree at all.
These shiny, simple success stories ignore the countless untold stories of those who put in the same effort but failed due to systemic prejudice or bad timing, or just not having family wealth to fall back on.
SB encourages us to focus only on the planes that made it back, making us believe the holes in the wing are the secret to survival.
And survivorship bias is also profoundly influential in how we talk about illness and mortality.
Oh, absolutely. Our language around death is saturated with these success-failure binaries. We talk about people losing their battle with cancer.
Which implies a choice, a lack of will, a forfeiture.
And this narrative creates tremendous psychological pressure. It compels observers to believe that a positive attitude, or doing everything right, eating cleanly, meditating, thinking only good thoughts, is what saved the survivors.
The author befriended a Hodgkin's lymphoma patient and vlogger named Racheli, who admitted that strangers would constantly imply her survival was a reward for being positive and resolute.
And that's such a tremendous burden when, as Racheli did, that so many amazing, determined people who did everything right tragically passed away.
The focus on attitude just feeds the bias, suggesting that a lack of recovery must be due to some failure of effort or optimism.
And this is why the rise of the dying girls vlogs, from women like Talia, Sophia, Claire, Regda, and Mary, was such a powerful cultural challenge to survivorship bias.
They used platforms like YouTube to document the unfiltered day-to-day reality of illness, not just the miraculous recovery stories.
They found agency in turning terrible things into a video, into art. They were humanizing the data we never see, the suffering, the pain, the moments where a positive attitude failed to save them.
Their imperfect vlogs directly countered that pervasive genre of inspiration porn.
That's the media that depicts disabled people trouncing obstacles with sheer willpower, while ignoring the fact that most Americans with disabilities are not sufficiently employed or supported, no matter how resolute they are.
These vlogs made death real and messy and visible. They showed that miracles are not the only evidence worth reporting.
But there was a dark paradox of attention embedded in the process.
Right. One of the vloggers, Courtney, saw her view counts plummet by the thousands immediately after she was declared cancer-free.
Remission tragically was bad for business. The public was intensely interested in the active process of dying, the struggle, the fear, the drama, not the mundane process of recovery, which lacks the drama that our primitive brain craves.
But despite that, the vlogging still offered a form of catharsis.
It did. The ability to upload these videos and know that they were impacting thousands of subscribers made the experience feel less meaningless. It was a way of wresting meaning from random misfortune.
And for the families, it provided a way to cheat death, knowing that their followers could go back and watch hundreds of vlogs, seeing them tap sparkles onto their eyelids, as if the person were still here, challenging the silence left by all that missing data. So if survivorship bias distorts how we view the past and success, the recency illusion, RI, is what distorts our perception of the present moment.
And it's a really deep-rooted tendency. It's the assumption that something is objectively new and therefore threatening and demanding of our attention simply because it's new to you.
This cognitive pattern explains why we engage in these collective panics about things that have, in some cases, been around for ages.
Like the UFO panic of 2021. The author describes being completely engrossed by that 60 Minutes UAP report, where ex-Navy pilots and ex-CIA officers were discussing footage that was, in some cases, decades old.
But the recency illusion made it feel like a totally new, imminent security risk. Our collective attention was hijacked because the stimuli, the reports, the footage, the official confirmation, it was all new to the public.
And our primitive brain is entirely responsible for this. RI is an evolutionary benefit. When the leading causes of death were external animal attacks, falls, drowning, it absolutely paid to be on high alert for fresh input.
If a predator rustling in the bushes was new to you or truly new to the world, the distinction was kind of trifling, right? Your survival depended on claiming your limited attention for that fresh input immediately.
Exactly. But today, the stimuli are conceptual and digital and abstract. It's not a predator in the bushes.
It's headlines, alerts, and viral thumbnails that are hijacking our amygdala, the brain's cognitive alarm system.
And the emotional older part of our brain gets what the sources call first dibs on interpreting incoming information. It prefers to just pole vault instantly to conclusions.
While the irrational, considered prefrontal cortex only gets second dibs.
And the consequence of this is the brutal reality of the attention economy. There's this constant capitalistic pressure to colonize the self, assaulting us with information at an inhumane, relentless rate.
Our stress hormones confuse clickbait with steep cliffs. The primitive brain just doesn't know the difference between a potentially career-ending email and a snake in the grass.
And this distortion also fundamentally warps our perception of time itself.
How so?
Novelty defines our sense of time. When the author fell in love with her partner, Casey, the newness of the romance elongated the hours. They'd spend half a day just counting the specks in each other's irises because everything was novel and had to be processed slowly.
But conversely, the COVID-19 lockdown, which lacked newness or borders or breaks in routine, caused time to feel grievously sluggish in the moment, but fleeting when you look back on it.
Time slows down when we're stimulated, and it speeds up when we're bored. It's no surprise we clung to that alien story. It was a novel threat, a fantasy, and an opportunity, all at once.
But as soon as the media determined the threat was either over or just too complex, we moved on to the next disaster. In a news cycle that sheds and regrows its skin every hour, our attention is perpetually drawn away from highly salient, important issues just because they've lost their flashiness.
The recency illusion prioritizes the immediate smoke signal over the slow-burning fire of long-term importance.
So is there an antidote to this? How do we fight back?
The key antidote involves applying the urgent versus important matrix, which was developed by the management thinker Peter Drucker.
Okay, so this schema helps you sort your tasks and your stimuli. Things can be urgent but not important.
Like a social media drama or friend's panic text.
Or they can be important but not urgent.
Like strategic planning, networking, or deep learning.
So if we can apply this matrix to all the digital stimuli coming at us, we can gain the power to slow down our own temporal perception.
Right. We can determine if that digital smoke signal is truly salient. Reading the news might be important, but rarely is it critically urgent enough to require our entire immediate attention right this second.
The research also suggests pairing this kind of analysis with the deliberate pursuit of awe.
Yes, that humbling wonder you associate with nature or collective dance. Being amidst billion-year-old peaks, as the author found, it profoundly relaxes our sense of time. It reminds us that a headline in our feed is not a predator in the bushes, and that most of the modern world's urgency is largely manufactured. And that feeling of urgency, the way the recency illusion and the attention economy assault our senses, it really disconnects us from the tangible reality of the present moment. Which brings us to our final bias, and this is one that actually offers a genuine path toward grounded personal worth and meaning.
This is the IKEA effect, i.e.
Yes. The IKEA effect is this counterintuitive propensity we have to ascribe disproportionately high worth, value, and emotional attachment to items we help create.
Even if the results are objectively amateurish or shoddy or flawed, like those frustrating mom chests you spend 3 hours assembling only to find you put the back panel on upside down.
Exactly. And while it's named after the flat-pack furniture giant, the bias was first observed decades earlier. There's this wonderful legend of the Betty Crocker instant cake mix in the 1940s.
Oh, right. When the instant cake mix was first introduced, sales were surprisingly slow.
They were. And why? Because homemakers felt a sense of guilt. They felt they hadn't truly made the cake by just adding water.
So General Mills responded with this brilliant psychological pivot. They relaunched the mix with the slogan, "Add an egg."
And that simple task provided the necessary psychological ingredient of affectance. And that's the key term here.
Affectance, what is that?
Affectance is the spiritually satisfying notion that we cause something to happen. That simple act of adding an egg made people feel relevant and purposeful. It offset what was described as the sobering shock of insignificance caused by new automated technology that was suddenly making their traditional domestic labor feel redundant.
So as modern life becomes exponentially more automated and screens just displace our hands, the yearning for that physical contribution, it persists.
It does. This fuels the entire DIY renaissance, the popularity of meal kits, crowdfunding platforms. We need that allegorical egg to feel relevant and purposeful in a digitized world.
The author details the IKEA effect in action while she was furniture flipping with her friend Richelli.
Right, they found this dusty, kind of mucus-colored seashell lamp. They decided to flip it, and after painting it this atrocious Hubba Bubba Bubble Tape pink, they instantly convinced themselves this grotesque object was worth hundreds of dollars.
Far more than its objective value. And that anecdote is so relatable because the IKEA effect warps our perception of objective value completely.
It does. The participants in the original 2011 studies were willing to pay significantly more for the amateurish Lego sets they built themselves than for objectively superior pre-assembled versions.
These flaws and personal customizations, the crooked leg on the IKEA dresser, the atrocious pink paint job.
They may not be optimized for profit, but they are what make us wince and laugh and spark conversation. They give the object life, a personality, and a shared history.
And the IKEA effect also functions as an important social glue. Sharing a handmade, mediocre object brings more genuine pleasure and connection than just displaying something you bought that's been perfectly optimized.
And doing things with our hands, whether it's knitting or pottery or furniture flipping, it grounds our attention in the present, which is the exact antidote to the digital frenzy caused by the recency illusion.
It connects us back to the vital role of human limitations in creation. The Australian musician Nick Cave argues that the sense of awe we feel in true art is predicated on human limitations and the sheer audacity to reach beyond our potential.
A capacity he believes AI cannot replicate. As one artist put it, a robot could compose the most enchanting concerto, but would never be as valuable as the nightly waltzes played on an upright Wurlitzer by a doting parent, simply because that person is making them, flaws and all.
So the IKEA effect suggests a really crucial shift is possible in how we define worth. Maybe we don't need to be optimized for maximum efficiency or profit,
but instead, optimized for purpose and connection. Our ingenuity, combined with technology, allows us to reach a kind of genuine sorcery that neither humans nor AI could achieve alone. #outro.
So we've looked at 7 massive cognitive distortions. We've traced how our ancient survival-based operating system clashes, sometimes violently, with the realities of the information age.
And the goal here, it's important to remember, is not to achieve some impossible, sterile state of perfect rationality.
No, it's simply to gain the awareness necessary to stop, take a breath, and change course when our minds are running on that outdated code.
But to see the present clearly, we have to first recognize our own biases, and that includes the persistent bias of declinism.
Right, that false impression that things are objectively worse now than they were in the past, and that it's all just downhill from here.
And that feeling is fueled by the fading effect bias, where our negative memories dwindle quicker than our positive ones, leading to this general golden idealization of a past that was actually objectively worse in almost every measurable way.
And if you counter that feeling with objective progress, the picture changes dramatically. Global poverty has been dropping exponentially for decades. Life expectancy, literacy, freedom, they've all increased significantly worldwide.
And yet, the percentage of Americans who report that their life is very happy has hung around 30% since the 1950s.
That profound disconnect suggests that material wealth and health and access to information do not in themselves solve the core malaise of the mind. That battle is internal.
And I think the greatest comfort offered by the experts interviewed for this research is that despite all these challenges, none of them would choose to live in any time other than the present.
The path forward has to move away from pessimism and toward what the sources call radical imagination and joy.
Joy, not shame or fear, is the powerful, sustainable motivator that allows us to build the future we actually want.
But to build that future consciously, we have to learn to inhabit the present fully, not just scroll past it.
And we might need a new word for that. A word to capture that specific, obscure sorrow we feel when we miss the moment, even as we're in it. That elusive nostalgia for the current moment, so precious in its ephemerality that the second you notice it, it's already slipped away.
The word proposed is tempusur, a portmanteau of the Latin tempus for time and susurrus for whisper. Tempusur.
This concept is really the opposite of the recency illusion, which speeds time up by prioritizing the external alarm. Tempusur is the practice of intentional slowing down. It's using the awareness of our biases, the halo effect, the proportionality bias, to savor the specific, messy, difficult reality we inhabit right now.
The reality that the IKEA effect helped us build. So we want to leave you with this question to explore. In an age where time feels perpetually warped and every bit of your attention is colonized by clickbait, how can you practice temps douceur to truly savor the wild, difficult, and beautiful reality that is happening right now before this precious moment is gone? We'll see you next time for the deep dive.